I stood in my kitchen, still wearing my heels from the airport. The air reeked of lemon dish soap and burnt toast. Ethan was on a step stool, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing plates. The sponge dwarfed his small, wrinkled fingers. He didn't even look up when I walked in. The sink overflowed with suds. A fly buzzed near the window. His teddy bear, Mr. Paws, lay soggy on the floor, covered in what looked like spaghetti sauce. I dropped my bag, heart pounding. "Sweetie, where's Grandma and Grandpa?" Ethan didn't answer. He rinsed a plate, then whispered, "Grandma said I'm not family." Something snapped in me. The scent of that cheap zoo hand sanitizer still clung to the counter. A balloon string blue tangled peeked out from the trash bin. I leaned against the fridge to stay upright. The calendar still read Thursday. It was Sunday. They left him. They took Noah, the real grandson, to the zoo and left Ethan alone. No note, no call, just a 7-year-old cleaning dishes to feel useful. My stomach turned. He was trying to be good enough, trying to earn a place they'd already denied him. "Did you eat?" I asked, voice cracking. He nodded. "Cereal, I think it was still good." He smiled, then this tiny crooked thing that nearly broke me. I crouched beside him, held him close. His shirt smelled like garlic and Clorox. He buried his face in my coat and sobbed. Ryan and I had left him with his parents because we trusted them, because we thought blood meant something. Turns out it did, just not in the way we hoped. Diane once said, "Noah's our blood. It's different." I had brushed it off, but now I understood what she meant. Ethan wasn't different. He was invisible to them. Forgotten, but not to me, never to me. I picked up Mr. Paws and wrapped Ethan in a warm blanket. He clutched the bear like it was life itself. I stared at the door, fists clenched. If they ever came back through that door, they'd find a different Claire waiting. Because from this moment on, I wasn't asking for their respect. I was taking back my son's place in this family. Would you fight back or walk away? Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own family? Where are you listening from? Share your story. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with Ethan's sketchbook in my lap. He'd drawn 3 stick figures. One held a balloon, another held a bear. The third stood outside a house frowning. I didn't need to ask which one was him. The coffee pot gurgled behind me, filling the kitchen with the smell of something burnt and bitter. Ryan's side of the bed had been untouched. He was still in Boston emergency back-end deployment. I hadn't told him what I found yet. I wasn't sure I could. My phone buzzed, a text from Diane. "Bye, hope the little guy behaved. Zoo was lovely." With a photo, Noah with a tiger balloon, Mark holding a churro, Diane's smile wide beneath her sunglasses. Ethan wasn't in it. I deleted the message, then immediately regretted it. Evidence disappears too easily. I reached for my planner. The pages were covered in color-coded blocks, Seattle Conference keynote prep team dinner. Each one had felt so important, until now. I had trusted them with my son. I had believed naively that family meant shared love, not just shared DNA, and yet time and again they reminded me Ethan wasn't theirs. Not really, not where it counted. The first Christmas after we adopted him, Diane gifted Noah a battery-powered Jeep. Ethan got a sweater 2 sizes too big. Handmade, she'd said. The tag read Macy's. Ryan had said they'll come around. I had believed him, because I wanted to, because believing otherwise hurt too much. I looked around the house. Every photo had Noah front and center. Ethan was always in the background, smiling but blurred. The living room still smelled faintly of cinnamon from the fall candle Diane brought over. It made me nauseous now. Ethan padded in, dragging his blanket hair tousled. He rubbed his eyes. "I don't have school today." "No, baby," I said, pulling him into my lap. "You're staying with me today." He melted into my chest, his tiny body still warm from sleep. I kissed the top of his head. He smelled like laundry sheets and peanut butter. I kept thinking about his words. Grandma said I'm not family. How casually that must have been said. I imagined Diane, arms crossed, voice cold. Noah's our grandson. You're not. I clenched my jaw. Ethan stirred. Did I do something bad? No, never. I held him tighter. This is not your fault. But in my heart, guilt gnawed like a slow leak. For every time I had looked away, laughed off the small digs, let them decide who counted. I thought I was protecting him. Maybe I was protecting myself from conflict, from being the daughter-in-law who always made things hard. Not anymore. Not after seeing my son wash dishes while they played with balloons. By noon, I had canceled 3 meetings. I microwaved dinosaur nuggets and sat beside Ethan on the couch. He munched quietly, eyes on his tablet, but his shoulders were hunched. Ryan called around 2:30. His voice was rushed. Conference bombed. People walked out. I'll fly back tomorrow. I said nothing at first. Then I came home early. A pause. Why, what happened? They left him alone, Ryan. I could barely keep it together. Noah went to the zoo. Ethan got the sink. Silence. I heard him exhale sharply. What? Diane told him he's not family. There was a long stretch of static-filled silence. Then I'm coming home tonight. He hung up before I could say more. I looked over at Ethan. He was drawing again. This time he drew 4 figures, all holding hands. One had a balloon, one had a bear. 2 stood tall in the middle. Us. That night I placed the sketch on the fridge, covered every holiday card Diane had ever sent. From now on, we define our family. Not them, not biology, not tradition. Just us, and I wasn't going to fail him again. The next few days blurred into one long ache. I kept Ethan home. We painted baked cookies, built pillow forts like it was the start of summer break. But underneath, something in me pulsed, a slow, cold burn. Every time my phone lit up with Diane T, I let it ring out. No voicemail, no apology, just silence. It wasn't the first time. It just hurt more now that I had seen it for what it was. The pattern had always been there. I had just called it something else. Like last fall at the pumpkin patch. Mark insisted Noah sit on Diane's lap for the family photo. Ethan stood beside me, clutching a small gourd. No room on Grandma's lap, she had said without even looking down. At the time I laughed, tried to play it off, but Ethan's smile had dropped just slightly. And then there was Christmas. Noah got a custom name puzzle. Ethan got an Amazon gift card. No tag, no wrapping. Ryan had tried. I'll talk to them, he said. But he didn't. He always hoped the next year would be better. We both did. Friday came. Ethan's class had a special person's breakfast. Each child could bring someone who made them feel loved. Ethan picked me. As we walked into the school cafeteria, he held my hand tightly. His eyes scanned for Diane. She's not coming, I said softly. He nodded, didn't ask why. His teacher greeted us with pancakes and paper crowns. The room buzzed with laughter and syrup. Noah was there too, seated between Diane and Mark. They didn't see us at first. Then Diane turned. Our eyes met. She smiled, waved, like nothing had happened. I didn't wave back. I turned to Ethan instead. Want extra strawberries? He beamed. 2 scoops. 3. We sat at the far end of the room near the windows. Ethan made a crown that said, Best Team, Il's Mom plus me. He decorated it with stars and little drawings of pancakes. At one point, Diane tried to approach. I stood, blocked her path. There's nothing to say, I whispered. She blinked. Hurt flickered across her face. But I didn't care. Not anymore. You don't get to hurt a child and then pretend it never happened. That night, I sat on the porch, glass of wine untouched. The wind carried the smell of someone grilling nearby. Inside, Ethan played video games. I opened the old family group chat. Scrolled up, years of pictures, birthdays, beach days, backyard, BBQs. In every photo, Noah was front and center. Ethan was often cropped, sometimes not there at all. I typed, paused, deleted, typed again. Grandkid, we need to talk. In person, Sunday, our house, no Ethan present. Mark replied with a thumbs up. Diane said nothing. I closed the chat, stared at the photo taped to the fridge, Ethan's 4 figures, all smiling, all equal. I wouldn't let him question his place again. Not in this house, not in this family. And if that meant burning bridges, then let them burn. Blood didn't make a family, love did. And I was done pretending otherwise. They arrived 10 minutes early. Mark held a pie. Diane wore pearls. I didn't open the door right away. I watched them from the window, their figures small behind the screen. Diane adjusted her blouse. Mark checked his phone. They looked like any suburban couple coming over for dinner. Except they weren't, not anymore. I finally opened the door, no smile, no invitation, just a nod toward the living room. Leave the pie on the porch. Diane's mouth twitched. Mark muttered something I didn't catch. They stepped inside. The air between us chilled. Not from the AC, from everything left unsaid. We sat, no coffee, no pleasantries. Diane started first. I don't understand the hostility. I raised an eyebrow. You left a 7-year-old alone. We were gone 2 hours, Mark cut in. He was fine. The house was locked. I laughed. A low, bitter sound. You left him chores and a cold Pop-Tart. Diane crossed her arms. He said he was used to helping. My voice rose. He's a child. I took a breath. Your grandchild. Diane's lips pressed tight. We never signed up for this. I blinked. What does that mean? She looked away. He's not ours. Not really. We didn't choose this. Mark nodded. He's not blood. You know how important legacy is. Legacy. That word sat heavy in the air, like it excused everything. I stood, walked to the mantel, picked up a photo Ryan holding Ethan at his adoption ceremony. Our first Christmas together, matching pajamas, Ethan's gap-toothed smile. I handed it to Diane. This is your legacy. She stared at it, didn't take it. I laid it on the table between us. I'm not asking you to love him the same, I said quietly, but I will not let you hurt him. They said nothing. From now on, no unsupervised visits, no holidays, no favors. If you want to see Ethan, it'll be with me or Ryan present. Mark leaned forward. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm protecting my son. The room pulsed with silence. Then Diane stood. She looked tired, older than I'd ever seen her. We raised Ryan to believe in family. And I'm raising Ethan to believe he belongs. They left without another word. No shouting, no tears, just the quiet scrape of shoes on hardwood and the click of the door behind them. I locked it, then bolted it. Later that night, Ryan got home. He walked into the kitchen, set down his duffel bag, and hugged me without a word. I told them I whispered, no more. He nodded into my shoulder. They crossed a line. We sat on the floor backs against the fridge. Ethan was asleep upstairs, Mr. Paws tucked under his chin. I thought we were doing the right thing, Ryan said, giving him both sides, keeping peace. We were giving him confusion, I replied, and silence. He nodded, ran a hand through his hair. We fix it now. We agreed therapy would start next week, not just for Ethan, for us too, to unlearn the things we thought were love, to rebuild something better. Later, I opened a box of old cards, birthday notes from Diane, all addressed to Ethan, never grandson, never our boy. It had always been there, in the details, in what wasn't said. And I had finally stopped pretending it didn't matter, because it did. It mattered more than anything. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No texts, no pop-ins, no invitations. For the first time in years, the family group chat was silent. I didn't miss it, but I noticed the space it left. Ethan asked fewer questions. He played more alone. His drawing shifted figures with smaller smiles, more distance between them. One morning, I found him coloring outside on the porch. He'd drawn a house with only 2 windows lit. I asked him who lived there. "Just us," he said, and Mr. Paws. I kissed the top of his head. "You forgot someone I teased." He paused, then shook his head. "No, I didn't. That stopped me cold." He wasn't just hurt. He was adapting, rewriting his idea of family, simpler, smaller, safer. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Because he didn't need my guilt. He needed my strength. That weekend, I skipped the Thompson Sunday brunch. No explanation, no excuse. We baked banana bread instead. Ethan mashed the bananas with too much enthusiasm. Flour dusted the countertops. His laugh filled the house again, if only briefly. But when he licked the spoon and looked up, he asked, "Is Noah mad at me?" I wiped his chin. Why would he be mad? Because he got the zoo, and I got left behind. My heart sank. He wasn't angry. He blamed himself. Ethan listened to me. I knelt beside him. "You did nothing wrong. Grown-ups made a bad choice. Not you." He nodded slowly, still unsure, still small. Later, while he napped, I sat at the edge of the bed. My chest felt like stone. I wanted to protect him from everything, but I couldn't rewrite the past. I could only draw a line in the sand and hold it. Ryan stayed quiet most nights. He worked late, drank tea instead of beer. His usual jokes faded. One night, I found him scrolling through childhood photos. All Thompson faces, birthdays, camping trips, holidays. Ethan wasn't in any of them. "Did they do this to us too?" he asked. "Make love conditional." I didn't have an answer. At therapy, Ethan said little. He clutched Mr. Paws and stared at the rug. The therapist was kind, patient. She asked about the zoo. He shrugged. "Did you want to go?" He whispered, "I didn't want the balloon. I just wanted someone to hold my hand." I looked away so he wouldn't see my tears. After the session, we got ice cream. Ethan picked vanilla with rainbow sprinkles. He sat on the bench outside and swung his legs. "Do I still get to see them?" he asked. "Maybe," I said honestly. "If they learn how to treat you right." He nodded, sucked on his spoon. "Then I'll wait." That night, I tucked him in tighter. Read him 3 stories instead of 1. He fell asleep clutching Mr. Paws' crown from school, still on his nightstand. I watched him breathe, soft, steady. He was healing, but slowly, carefully. And I would guard that healing with everything I had, even if it meant standing alone, even if it meant becoming the villain in someone else's family story. Because for the first time, I understood being a good mother sometimes means burning the bridge and not looking back. I started with boundaries, hard, uncomfortable ones. I called the school, updated emergency contacts, no more Diane or Mark. I removed them from our shared photo albums, every digital trace of their favoritism gone. I didn't do it in anger, I did it in clarity. Love without respect wasn't love, and family without safety wasn't family. Ethan's therapist recommended a daily routine, so we built one together: mornings with check-ins, drawing breaks, after school, bedtime journaling. He called it Mission Kind. Each night he'd write or draw one thing that made him feel safe. Some days it was toast, others it was me. One evening he drew Ryan reading beside him. He labeled it Dad, my real one. I showed it to Ryan. He stood quietly for a long time, eyes damp, then whispered, "We're doing okay, huh?" I nodded, but I didn't say what I was really thinking. We weren't just doing okay, we were building a new blueprint, brick by painful brick. One afternoon, Ryan came home with a folder, a legal one. He'd spoken to our lawyer, drafted a guardianship clause. "In case something ever happens to us," he said, "I want Ethan protected. Clearly, fully." It was the first time he'd taken formal steps without me asking, and it meant more than I could say. We notarized it the next day. Ethan's name in ink declared as ours, legally, emotionally, permanently. I bought a small lockbox, placed it inside along with a photo of the 3 of us. A copy of his birth certificate, a note, "You are loved, you are chosen, you are ours." That night, I told Ethan about the ball. His eyes lit up. "Like a treasure?" he asked. "Yes, for the truth, so no one can take it away again." He thought for a moment, then ran upstairs and came back with Mr. Paws. "Put him inside too. He knows everything." I smiled heart tight. I couldn't lock away his pain, but I could give him something stronger to hold on to. Diane emailed a week later. Subject: coffee, just us. The message was short, 5 sentences, carefully worded, no mention of the zoo, no apology, just an olive branch dipped in varnish. I stared at the screen for a long time, then I replied. 1 hour, neutral place, no expectations. We met at a cafe halfway between our homes. She wore sunglasses she didn't take off. Her hands trembled when she lifted her cup. "I wasn't ready," she said. "Ready to love someone I didn't carry." I said nothing, let the silence hold her. "I was wrong," she added, voice cracking. "I thought blood would always matter more." "It doesn't," I replied. "Not to Ethan, not to us." She nodded slowly. "I see that now. We didn't hug, we didn't cry." But she reached across the table, touched the tip of her fingers to mine, and it was enough. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but acknowledgement. The first real one. When I came home, Ethan was drawing again, this time 6 figures, all holding hands, one off to the side, smaller, still hesitant. But included. That night he asked, "Can Noah come over sometime?" I said maybe, then tucked him in. I lay awake long after. Some stories don't end in perfect reunions, but they can still end in peace. Have you ever had to choose peace over pleasing others? Have you ever redefined what family means in your life? Your story matters, just like Ethan's. Share your thoughts or experience below, and tell us, where are you listening from tonight? Spring didn't arrive like a celebration. It crept in slowly, snow melting into stubborn patches, buds barely pushing from bare branches. But it came. Just like I was coming back to myself. One morning, I opened Ethan's closet, folded up every hand-me-down, every shirt with Noah's name in faded marker, each one a small betrayal I hadn't seen clearly before. I placed them in a donation box, taped it shut. Ethan walked in just as I finished. "Where's my green hoodie?" he asked. I crouched down. "Do you want to pick something new, just for you?" He tilted his head. No one wore it before. "Nope," I smiled. "Only yours." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I want blue this time." That afternoon, we drove to the outlet mall, just us. He picked a soft hoodie with a dinosaur on the chest and socks with planets. At the checkout, the cashier smiled. "Shopping day?" Ethan answered before I could. "I'm getting things that are only mine." She blinked, unsure what to say. I just smiled. He deserves that. We got ice cream after, vanilla for him, coffee for me. He dipped his finger in mine and giggled. "It's bitter." "It's strong," I said, "like some grown-up things." He leaned against my side. "I like sweet better." So did I, but some things had to be bitter first, before they healed right. I started therapy on my own that week. It wasn't about Ethan, it was about me, the part of me that kept accommodating cruelty, that feared conflict more than damage. I told the therapist about the zoo, about the dish soap, about Mr. Paws on the floor. She listened, then said, "That moment didn't just hurt you, it woke you." She was right. I had spent years managing other people's comfort, making peace with subtle wounds. Now I was making something else space. For Ethan, for me, for a future not held hostage by other people's rules. That's when the idea came. Small at first, like most good things. A few nights later, while Ethan was asleep, I opened my laptop, Googled support for adoptive families Colorado. What came up was sparse, generic articles, some legal advice, but not what I needed. What I needed was other mothers like me, other families navigating that quiet, familiar ache. So I started something, a private Facebook group, name The Belonging Bench. Tagline: because love doesn't require blood. I invited 5 women I knew. 2 joined within a day. 1 shared a story almost identical to mine. She ended it with, "I thought I was just being sensitive, but now I see I was just being dismissed." I replied, "We're not sensitive, we're awake." More people joined. Stories poured in. 1 mom from Ohio, 1 grandmother from Arizona, even an older adoptee, now 50, who said, "I still remember the day I was left out of a Christmas photo." We started sharing not just pain, but strategies. How to set boundaries, how to talk to kids, how to document, respond, protect. I wasn't just healing, I was building. At work, I approached Sharon, my director, told her about the group, about the emotional gaps adoptive families fall through. She nodded slowly. "My sister adopted. It's harder than people think." I proposed a pilot, an internal resource network support, storytelling nights, educational panels, all centered on adoptive and blended families. She approved it in 2 weeks. Small budget, 2 interns, but it was a start. I told Ryan over dinner. He paused mid-bite. "You're turning our story into something bigger." I smiled. It deserves to be. A few days later, Diane sent an email. Subject: supervised park visit. We'd like to try again. The message was careful. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for presence. I asked Ethan. He looked thoughtful. "Only if you come too." "Always," I said. We chose a public park with wide open space. Ethan brought chalk. Noah brought bubbles. They didn't hug. They didn't pretend, but they played, quietly, side by side. Diane sat near me, watched, said nothing, until the end. "Thank you for trusting us enough to try again." I turned to her. "My trust isn't automatic anymore." She nodded. "It shouldn't be." We left the park with no fanfare, no promises, just possibility. That night, Ethan drew 4 stick figures. Us, Noah, Diane. In a row. 1 figure stood slightly apart but still visible. He handed it to me. "Do you like it?" I looked at the page, at the boy beside me. "I love it," I said. Because it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being seen. And this time he was. The invitation I sent was brief but deliberate. Family gathering, Sunday afternoon, our home, backyard, casual. Bring nothing but respect. No emojis, no qualifiers, just facts. It was the first time I used the word family and meant it on my terms. Sunday came with soft sunlight and a chill that hadn't yet given up on spring. I laid out picnic blankets and folding chairs, all facing inward. No head of the table, no center stage, just a circle, equal space for everyone or no one at all. Ryan trimmed the hedges in silence that morning. He hadn't asked me what I planned. He didn't need to. His quiet trust felt louder than any approval. Ethan helped me mix lemonade. He stirred with focused tongue poking slightly from his lips, like it always did when he was concentrating. I handed him a wooden spoon and watched him gently press the lemons, turning their pulp into something bright and tangy. Something new. "You think they'll come?" he asked. "They said they would," I replied. He didn't ask who they meant. He already knew. At 2:07 p.m., I saw Diane's car pull up. Mark stepped out first, adjusting his sunglasses even though the sun was already low. Diane followed, holding a Tupperware container. I could smell the lemon bars through the plastic, her signature unchanged. Noah trailed behind them, hugging a thick sketchbook to his chest. My throat tightened. They walked slowly, unsure of where to stand. For once, they waited. That was new. Ryan opened the gate but didn't speak. He gave a nod, firm but not warm. That was all he could give. I understood. Ethan stood behind me, fingers curling into the hem of my sweater. Diane offered a small smile. "We brought the lemon bars," she said, voice too cheery. "Leave them on the table," I replied. Not unkind but not soft either. They obeyed. No one rushed. No one filled the space with chatter. For the first time, the silence between us felt earned. Ethan didn't approach Noah. But when Noah walked over and handed him a folded paper, Ethan took it, unfolded it, a drawing. A spaceship again. 2 figures floating inside each with a name above their head. No arrows, no lines of separation. Just names, side by side. Ethan didn't smile, but he didn't walk away either. He pointed to the ship's window. "Need stars," he said. Noah nodded, sat beside him, began to draw. And in that small, almost imperceptible gesture, 2 boys sketching constellations together, I felt something shift. Not fixed, but shifting. And for now, that was enough. Midway through the afternoon, I walked into the house and returned with a picture frame wrapped in linen. I placed it gently on the patio table, right in the middle of the circle of chairs. Ethan stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes alert. Ryan joined us moments later, resting a steady hand on my lower back. No words, just presence. I turned to the group: Diane, Mark, Noah, and a few extended relatives who'd come out of politeness, not conviction. It didn't matter. This wasn't for them, it was for Ethan, for us. "I want to show you something," I said, voice steady but low. I pulled off the linen and revealed the framed document inside. The gold seal caught the afternoon light. "Legal guardianship confirmation," it read in bold. Below that, Claire Thompson and Ryan Thompson, legal parents of Ethan Michael Thompson. Effective immediately, permanently, irrevocably. I let them read it in silence. I let the words do what all the years of awkward smiles and forced gatherings could never accomplish: define without apology the shape of our family. Diane's hand trembled slightly in her lap. She didn't look up. Mark blinked twice, then adjusted his collar like the air had suddenly grown too thick. Noah glanced between them, then at Ethan, then back at the document. "So this means no one else gets to take him." Ethan turned to him. "No, only Mom and Dad. It's real now." I swallowed hard. That word, real, meant everything. For years, we had let the ambiguity fester. Let others speak for us about us around us. Not anymore. I looked straight at Diane. There won't be another moment where my son is made to feel like a guest in his own life. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. We didn't know how much we were hurting him. "No," I said. "You chose not to look closely." Mark stood up slowly. "And what now?" "Are we just cut off?" "You're not owed access," Ryan said, calm and clear. "If there's a future relationship, it starts with acknowledgement, then accountability. And it stays on Ethan's terms," I added. There was no yelling, no breaking down, just the quiet sting of accountability settling into old bones. That document was more than a legal form. It was a mirror, one they finally had to look into. For the first time, I felt the full weight of my motherhood, not as something I fought for, but something no one could take from me again. After everyone left, the quiet didn't feel hollow, it felt earned. The paper plates were still stacked on the side table, juice cups half empty, sidewalk chalk drawings fading under the cool breeze. I walked around the yard barefoot, gathering what was left. Socks, crayons, a paper crown Ethan had dropped mid-play. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the lawn. The tire swing swayed gently, empty, but not lonely. Ethan was inside rinsing blueberries. He said he wanted one last snack before bedtime. Ryan had gone to put on Jazz, his signal that the day was winding down. I paused under the oak tree where the boys had drawn their ship earlier. The sketch was still taped to the bark with 2 strips of painter's tape. A spaceship with 2 names, Noah and Ethan. A small flag in the corner read, "Safe Planet." I traced the edges with my eyes. No divisions, no qualifiers, just belonging. Ethan came outside with a small bowl and curled beside me on the steps. "Did they say anything after I went in?" he asked between bites. I nodded. Grandma said she's trying to learn. Grandpa mostly listened. Is it okay if they keep learning? I took a breath. Only if it makes you feel safe. He looked down at a blueberry in his hand, turned it over, then popped it into his mouth. They didn't say sorry to me, he said quietly. No, I admitted, not yet. He leaned his head on my shoulder. I'll wait, but I won't forget. I held him closer. You don't have to. The sky turned lavender and pale gold. A few early stars blinked into view. He pointed. Look, that one's Mr. Paws. I smiled. Then that one must be you. He looked up at me. And you? I kissed the top of his head. I'm the one making sure you always shine. We sat there until the sky turned navy, until the cold kissed our ankles, until he whispered, I'm ready for bed, and stood with his empty bowl. Inside, he brushed his teeth while I pulled back the covers. He placed Mr. Paws on the pillow first, always, then slid under the sheets. Before I turned off the light, he reached for my hand. Thank you for today. You earned it, I whispered. His eyes closed slowly, lashes long, breath steady, peaceful. And I stood in the doorway for a long time, not because I doubted him, but because I finally believed myself. This chapter of our story wasn't loud. It didn't need a courtroom or a fight. It only needed truth, witnessed, named, lived. And we had done that. Together. It's been a year since the backyard gathering. The framed guardianship document still sits on our hallway console, right next to a photo of Ethan in his blue hoodie smiling with a missing front tooth. He asked me once why I kept it out in the open. So no one ever forgets, I said. He didn't ask who no one was. He knew. Some mornings feel remarkably ordinary now. I make coffee while he packs his own lunch. He likes turkey sandwiches with mustard, no lettuce. He's learned to fold the corners of the baggie just right so nothing leaks. Some mornings like this one, I drive him to school and we don't talk much. Just music on the radio, the kind of quiet that means we're safe. His therapist said something last month that stayed with me. Ethan doesn't flinch at family words anymore. That's a big shift. I hadn't realized how often he used to brace himself. For questions, for corrections, for being othered. Now when people ask who he belongs to, he answers without looking up Claire and Ryan. I'm adopted, but I'm all theirs. He says it like someone who no longer needs permission to be fully loved. Ryan and I don't talk about Diane and Mark much. The visits became infrequent, then paused. Noah and Ethan still exchange drawings sometimes. I let those lines stay open, but I no longer force doors that remain half shut. Instead, I poured myself into the community we started. The Belonging Bench group now has over 3,000 members, parents, guardians, adopted teens, even grandparents who want to learn better late than never. Every Tuesday, I host a virtual circle called Quiet Courage. We don't fix each other. We listen. We witness. Some nights when Ethan's asleep and Ryan's reading beside me, I scroll through the posts. People sharing courtroom wins, school meetings, survived hard conversations they finally dared to have. And every so often, someone says it out loud. I thought I was alone in this. Turns out I was just the first one to say it. That more than anything feels like legacy. Not in bloodlines, but in blueprints. In saying this, pain stops here. This story starts again with me. I've started journaling again. Not because I have something profound to say, but because remembering quietly feels like a kind of ceremony. Sometimes I write about the early years before we had words for what was missing. Other days, I write about the little things, like the first time Ethan corrected someone at the grocery store who said, "You look just like your mom." He smiled and said, "I don't. But we both like mint chip ice cream and that's even better." Or when he chose his own electives this semester, robotics and creative writing, because I want to build things and tell people what they mean. That sentence stuck with me more than he'll ever know. He's taller now. His voice has changed. He doesn't reach for my hand automatically when we cross streets, but when he's tired, when he's thinking deeply, he still curls into my side like he did at 7. that I suspect will never fully disappear. One night after dinner, he asked if he could bring Mr. Paws to school. I blinked. For what? English. We're writing about memory. I want to tell mine. I hesitated. You know, you don't have to talk about the bad parts. He looked at me with those same unwavering eyes I'd seen that first night in the kitchen. I'm not telling it because it hurt. I'm telling it because I'm still here. He brought the bear wrapped in tissue, placed carefully in his backpack. He came home that day glowing. My teacher cried a little. She said I was brave, but I didn't feel brave. I just felt ready. I told him sometimes readiness is the most sacred kind of courage, the quiet kind, the kind that grows one truth at a time. That evening, he taped a new drawing above his desk. A house with a front porch and wide windows, 3 figures waving, one small bear sitting on the steps. He titled it, Home Even When It Was Hard. I stared at it longer than I meant to, because it wasn't just a picture. It was proof that we had built something no one could take away, and he saw it too. Some weekends I drive past the old zoo. It's only 20 minutes away, tucked behind a set of strip malls and one sleepy diner. The parking lot looks the same: faded lines, crooked trees, children spilling out of minivans with juice pouches in hand. But I don't stop. I used to flinch at the sight of it the way you flinch from an old bruise when someone touches it too soon. Now I just drive by and let it stay where it belongs, behind me. One Saturday in April, Ethan asked if we could go to the city library. There's a guest speaker, he said. She was adopted too. I smiled. You want me to come? He shrugged. If you want, I think I want to ask her something. So we went, sat near the back. The speaker was warm, clear-eyed, and steady. She spoke about finding yourself in fragments and how it can take years to know you're whole. At the end, they passed around a mic. Ethan raised his hand. My stomach twisted gently. When the mic reached him, he stood tall. Hi, I'm Ethan. I used to think family was about who claimed you first. Now I think it's about who never lets you go. The room fell quiet. A different kind of silence. The kind that says, we saw that. Afterward, a woman behind us leaned forward and whispered to me, is he yours? I didn't hesitate. Yes, every part of him. And I meant it. Not because we shared DNA, not because a paper says so, but because we built something sacred, and we protected it when no one else would. Before bed that night, Ethan placed Mr. Paws on the bookshelf. He can sleep standing up now, he said, grinning. He's strong. So is the boy who carries him. So is the mother who stayed when it was hardest. So is the story we told quietly, fiercely, and on our own terms. Have you ever had to fight for the love that should have been given freely? Has anyone ever made you feel like family was something you had to earn? Your voice matters here. Share your story below and let us know, where are you listening from? Subscribe to Ian Reddit's Story for more real stories about justice, closure, and quiet empowerment after 40.